Considering that South Africa came from a history with deeply laid structural economic challenges, South Africa did extremely well. With democracy came great prospects, and it served as the perfect pedestal which South Africa could step onto to launch itself onto a trajectory for increased resource distribution, equality, and prosperous growth. Foreign direct investment flowed in, investor confidence grew, and South Africa set itself up on the stage as a global investment destination. South Africa has witnessed a number of successes as well, such as being able to maintain a 3.1% GDP level growth, even during the period of economic recession. However, moving on to more current issues, South Africa is still very adverse to economic fluctuations. Examples of this are the slow recovery in advanced economies and the slow growth of China, accompanying the decrease of commodity prices. This drastically affected the South African economy. Domestic events have also eroded, such as the political situation, which threatens South Africa's great mapping as an investment destination. This could severely threaten South Africa's amounts of foreign direct investment. Student protests continue to put more strain on government budgets as government loses its fiscal maneuverability. The future for South Africa looks highly uncertain at this point in time. How could the NDP possibly wish to achieve these drastic goals? But we must also make important mention here that these objectives all include sub-objectives, sub-goals, sub-targets, which will help us and aid us towards reaching our employment targets. The main focus area is on rapid inclusive economic growth by removing the constraints on job creation, investments, and saving. If South Africa wishes to reach the NDP vision in 2030, GDP would have to double. This implies a 5.4% GDP increase average every year from 2011. The main idea behind the employment objectives is to increase the gross domestic product, to increase the growth of the economy. This can only be done via technological progress, and this implies investment in research, education, and in new technologies. Models such as the rover production model, the solo growth model, make it imperative to us and explicitly show to us how important ideas are linked to new outputs. Electricity supply bottlenecks will have to be addressed. There is no point in creating new technologies that cannot be powered. Political risks will have to be reduced so as to maintain our investment confidence. Income would have to spread from the bottom 40%. We'd have to promote entrepreneurial activities in rural communities. The financial burden on government should have to be reduced to increase fiscal space maneuverability. We'd have to address structural impediments in the labor market. We'd have to increase our savings culture, and we'd have to bolster exports. Graph indicates to us the government debt to GDP ratio. We can see by this graph that government debt has been consistently rising due to low growth, represented here by the downward trend. South Africa's current account deficit is among the largest in emerging markets. Increased financial pressures, such as the Fees Must Fall campaign, campaignings for higher government salaries, and frequent protests for service delivery are not even depicted here. So this would indicate to us that the fiscal balance faces future, even further deterioration. On this graph, we plot net savings in blue, gross capital formation in green, and exports in red. We can see that at the time of NDP creation, net savings was quite high, and then experienced quite a significant drop, even delving into negative numbers, until 2013, where it just breached the surface, continued to drop again, and then rose in 2014. Currently, the net savings level is well below the starting 16% at the time of NDP creation. It is actually lowered as a percentage of GDP from 15.4% in the fourth quarter of 2015 to 16% in the first quarter of 2016. However, if the growth rate seen in 2014 can be attained or re-attained and continued, the savings goals might just be feasible. We can see that at the time of NDP creation, gross fixed capital formation showed significant growth prospects. However, from 2013, these rates had significantly decreased. The political outlook also does not seem to be favorable for FDI to boost gross capital formation. We notice this in the weakening of exchange rates. An example also that occurred, that is an example of South Africa's increased vulnerability to global economic shocks, is a 100 billion rand decrease in foreign direct investment within 48 hours by one of the largest investment managers in Africa, Public Investment Corporation. On the note of technological progress, very little investment takes place with regards to technology and research. In 2012-2013 period, only 0.76% of GDP was allocated to technological progress. 0.6% was the overall increase from 2002 all the way up till 2012. This is not a very impressive figure if we hope to bolster economic growth via technological progress. At the time the NDP was created, exports were actually falling. However, they've seen a significant, modest increase. We must note here that this graph denotes exports as a percentage of GDP. Export levels are increasing. In fact, there was a 0.4% increase in the value of merchandise exports in 2015 in the fourth quarter, and one of 0.7% increase in the first quarter of 2016. Exports are rising in between 3 and 4%. However, the highest was a 7% in 2010 at the period of NDP implementation. However, this is still lower than the 6% required to reach the goals laid out in the NDP. Objectives in the NDP concerning the unemployment rates were that unemployment was to go from 24.9% in June 2012 to 6% in 2030 and reaching a 14% along the way at 2020. However, if we look at the trajectory, it is on an upward trend. From 1995 to 2010, unemployment rate grew faster than employment. Currently, the unemployment rate is 26.6%, even higher than the rates in 2010. This does not look very prospectful towards reaching the goal of a 14% unemployment rate by 2020. One of the major challenges concerning unemployment is that of the youth. In 2014, 8.3 million people were unemployed in South Africa, and 53.6% approximately of this were youth. Although we see an increase in the labor force participation rate, unemployment still rises. The reason for this is that the labor force participation rate is not rising fast enough to outpace the growth of the workforce base. The population still increases at a far greater rate than does the labor force participation rate. Concerning public employment goals, the government planned to employ 1 million people by 2015 and 2 million people by 2020, eventually reaching 3.3 million people by 2030. In the fourth quarter of 2015, total formal non-agricultural employment reached 8.9 million, of which 204 million were employed by government. This is almost 1 million above its expectations, as it only planned on reaching the 2 million goal by 2020. However, the civil service bill in South Africa has grown, and researchers at Dahl, Breitenbach and Yanni Rousseau noted that the civil service bill had increased by 145.6% in between 2005 and 2012. The growth in the civil service remuneration is not sustainable, as it threatens to crowd out other spending priorities. And although the government provided employment of times in economic hardship, as in the 2009 period, when employment was not drastically affected, these levels of government employment are not sustainable, especially considering the risks faced by a very unionized labor force, which is constantly engaged in mass action to raise their wages above levels of inflation. This will lead to extremely strained budgets of the government employees, especially considering the future prospects of tertiary education in the country. We must remember that all of these employment objectives had the underlying basis of economic growth as the main driver of change within the employment sector. Economic growth still remains stunted due to our extroverted economy and decreasing investment, decreasing political trust and confidence as the political risks increase and continuously rise. Concerning our exports, Exports are on a steady rise, and they might even be able to reach the 6% per annum increase in order to attain the development goals which would spur employment. Technological progress has not been significantly made. This will also hamper the ability to create new capital, if more efficient capital, and increased levels of productivity.